WRUU LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And it is time for Savannah Lexicon. This is Wayne. We've got a good show this morning for you. We have District 2 Alderman Bill Durrence, who has always got some interesting observations and opinions and a lot of good knowledge on what's going on in this fine city. So looking forward to that. Let me just tell you, if you're a first-time listener, Savannah Lexicon is a show designed to inform the listener about important social, political, and cultural issues that shape Savannah, as well as about opportunities to experience things in and around this beautiful city that might bring an added measure of grace and joy to your life. And regular listeners will know that the very first thing, almost the very first thing I have to do is the very exciting general disclaimer. So let me get right into that. I know you're waiting for it. The viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. Okay, well, we got that out of the way. How are you, Alderman, today? Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Thank you.
Right.
And I will add my disclaimer again, as I did last time, that any opinions I express today don't represent the view of the city necessarily. I don't speak specifically for the city, and
yes,
and it's quite possible that all of my 8 colleagues on council and my wife disagree with me on these opinions.
Well,
so.
Okay, all right, noted. And you know what? That's one of the things I like about you, though, as far as you don't necessarily mind. I mean, you know, if you feel strongly about an issue and everybody else on the council is going one way, you'll go the way that you feel is right. So that's a good mark, I believe. All right. Well, good Lord, so much to talk about that we could talk about. We might as well start, I guess, with today's headline, but let's give a little nutshell background, I guess, as a reminder to everybody. So city county law enforcement merged, I think, when was it?
I think it was, I don't remember it, but I think it was 2003.
2003. That sounds right to me.
I think
yeah.
was, yeah.
It's been over a decade. I know that much. So, yeah, that sounds about right. 2003. City council. All right. So there was the city and county, I guess, engaged a consultant to look at the situation with crime, with law enforcement here. And of course, we have the continuing problem of crime in the city, and certainly most ominously the violence. And conducted a study to see how to, what we needed to do to most effectively and efficiently provide police protection in the city and the county. Consultant comes back essentially and says, and obviously I'm just kind of running this by loosely and not exactly precisely, but essentially they said we need something like about 150 police officers to get to the mark of a very high percentage of high priority calls being addressed within 7 minutes, which seems to be the time period that the experts think is a good thing to reach in terms of how quickly law enforcement officers can get to a high priority call. And they think 150 officers are needed. The county commissioners disagree, and they, for their own reasons, and we can talk about that, but they disagreed. So the city council voted essentially to undo the merge, if you will. And that's where we are now. Now, today, is that about right, what I just said, as a kind of a wrap-up?
Well, I might fill in some details if you like, but it's close enough, certainly.
Yeah, that's the general overall gist of it. Now, today in the headlines of the old Savannah Morning News, of course, is the designation and the indication that the Savannah Area Chamber of Commerce, Savannah Downtown Business Association, Savannah Economic Development Authority, and Tourism Leadership Council presented a joint letter, saying that, to quote from the newspaper, they believe dissolving the police merger sends the wrong message. And so they are essentially appealing to City Council to revisit this issue and rethink this issue. So the issue being the demerging, if you will, of the joint Chatham and City Police Department and law enforcement. Okay. So what about that? Where are we with that? I guess you guys, this is brand new, and you guys have yet to kind of do anything with this yet. Where are we at in this? What do you think this is going
first,
to?
The letter from those four business organizations asked not just the city, but the city and the county.
It was city and the county. True.
And we all speak from a personal perspective and a point of view. So I don't want to make any pretense that I'm somehow unbiased in this and everybody else is biased. I mean, we all have our opinion based on where we're standing.
Sure.
And that there may or may not be, real accuracy in some of those things, but that's all I can do. The first off, the Berkshire study that you referred to was to do two things. It was intended to help us figure out a funding formula for the city and county share of the merged police department. And it was also to look at our policing efforts and see what we might do to do better, what things they might offer. And they actually came back on that part. They came back with, I believe it was 47 recommendations.
Wow. Okay.
And some of them are things that the chief can put into place as he has the opportunity without having to worry about, getting permission or extra funding or anything like that. Some of it will require more specific efforts or support from elected officials or from city manager and county manager or whatever. But the big part of that was the recommendation. They gave us three options for improving response times. And it was either 7 minutes or 10 minutes, and whether we would take 3 years or 5 years to get that in place. And the city opted for the best of the highest performance of those three, a 7-minute response time, and that's not response time on everything.
Right.
That's for 90%.
High priority.
90% of the high priority or Part 1 crimes.
Right.
And we opted to have a 7% response time. And
or
to achieve
a 7 minute.
7 minutes, right?
7 minute response time.
Thank you. And to achieve that within 3 years. And to do that, the recommendation was that we would need 150 additional officers. Right. The reason we did the Berkshire study is when we came into office at the beginning of 2016. It seemed to those of us who were coming in, and there's some room for different opinions about this, but it seemed to us, it certainly seemed to me, that there was a real stalemate between the previous administration and the county government. They just weren't able to sit down at the table together and talk and come to some kind of resolution. There had just been this ongoing stalemate for some time. Yeah. And so we decided that we will do whatever we need to break that stalemate. And the city agreed, city council agreed, to take what county commissioners at the time felt like was $2 million more than they should be paying into the police.
Okay, wait a minute. $2 million more than they should be paying.
Well, what they thought was their share.
They should be paying. Okay.
So I think it was $14 million that they were paying basically, and they felt like it should be more like 12. I don't have the exact numbers on this, but so we said, okay, we'll do that. We'll just knock $2 million off.
Okay.
And this is a very broad generalization of all of this, but we'll just knock that $2 million off, and we'll do this study to figure out exactly what the funding formula should be. But once we get the results, it will be retroactive back to January of 2016. So if it turns out that you actually did owe that $2 million, then you'll have to pay. And everybody agreed to that approach.
Okay.
But we felt like that got us moving in a way that nothing had been going on. So then we started the study, and
Okay. And everybody agreed, but everybody agreed, including the county.
all the county, all the city. Now, I don't know if they had a unanimous vote
Well, yeah,
on,
but
on the commission, but it was agreed to by the city and the county to do this.
Okay.
City and county staff and sworn officers worked for, I think it was something like 25 hours of meeting time, that they worked through all of the details of this with the consultant, and they came up with these recommendations.
Yeah.
Now, whatever the recommendations were, there's always room for disagreement and maybe some negotiation on some of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our problem was once we got the recommendations from Berkshire, we said, okay, we're going to adopt this best response time. And the county indirectly seemed to indicate that they were not interested in that. But the bigger problem, in that they didn't agree with the funding formula,
Right.
and they didn't agree with the amount of back money
Right.
owed.
Right.
And whatever might have been possible to come to terms on all of that, when we sent them the official letter telling them our position, we never heard back from them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we were put in a position where we couldn't get a response, and there's nowhere to go with that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Gotta have communication.
We could debate the amounts,
Yeah.
but that wasn't the real issue. The real issue was we couldn't get a response. And we just felt like when the 21-day period ended, we had to do something because we're starting to work on our budgets for next year now. We had to make some decisions about some things because if, in fact, we split the department, we won't be hiring 150.
Right.
Well, I don't know how many officers we'll be hiring because some of the current officers will go to work for whatever the county chooses to do in either creating a police force or working with the sheriff's department. So we'll lose some of the current officers and we'll have to replace them.
Right.
We would not need an additional 150
Yeah.
if we're not
Good.
policing the unincorporated parts of the county as well. So exactly what the number is we'll need, I don't know. It's probably a little more like 100, but I don't know that that's an accurate
certainly going to
count.
be the majority anyway.
But it will be more because we are committed to that 7-minute response time.
Right.
The but we got nothing back.
Yeah.
So we had nowhere to go on that. So we are committed to doing this. The things that we heard indirectly through the media or whatever, but again, no official response, was that they didn't think the 7-minute response time was necessary in the county.
Right. Exactly.
Again, you
That's
can
what
agree
I've
or disagree about that, but to run a two-tiered system where we have a different kind of response time in the county than in the city is a management nightmare.
I would think so, yes.
And really didn't feel like that was possible. In the past, some other disparities in approaching this between city and county were a formula that a very broad formula that was used for creating a number of sworn officers was 3 per 1,000 residents. And I mean that's not an exact count, but using that as a general formula, there was some conversation from some of the county commissioners that they actually preferred 2 per 1,000 residents. Well, that was another thing where we can't get into having one staffing level in the city and another staffing level in the county. If it's a merged department, it has to operate under the same kind of management conditions. So, and all of that is speculation because, again, we never got any kind of formal response on any of that. So we just felt like we were in a position where we weren't getting a response. We couldn't even sit and negotiate and talk about this stuff because we had nothing. And another part of my decision to vote for the demerge is that a recognition that this has been a long-running problem of coming to terms on anything we wanted to do. We have a policy committee that's supposed to make decisions about any kind of new incentives, new initiatives, anything like that with police, which the policy committee is made up of the mayor and the chairman of the commission and the city and county managers. And it has been impossible, or nearly impossible, to get those meetings convened. So it just it became this. To me, it seemed like it was going to be this never-ending struggle. Even if we kept the department together, this never-ending struggle to just meet and deal with decisions that we need to deal with on a regular basis.
Right.
And that was the bottom line of the frustration for me. It just seemed like we could do better if we just care of our own business.
So has that sort of frustration that you're talking about, getting together and all of and the communication issues and all of that, gone back all the way to the beginning of the merger, do you think? I mean, or is it?
Well, I wasn't.
Yeah, you weren't really
on council for that.
You
but
weren't on
certainly
council, but
we saw some of that stalemate that looked to us like we could somehow break it when we came into office last year.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that this was part of that.
Right.
Again, an ongoing problem of just getting the policy committee together to make decisions about doing something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, golly. All right. Well, let's just talk a minute. Then we'll get to this letter from the organizations and what you think about that. Of course, you haven't had time to think too much about that, but let's just touch base for a minute. So, because it just seems like, and I certainly don't even pretend to be any kind of expert on this at all, but I mean, it just seems like, at least ideally, at least potentially, that the being merged like that would be a better, more efficient scenario. It just, in general rules, you think if an organization, if you got two different organizations that are doing much the same thing, and that efficiency would say if you have one organization together that's merged, that's going to work more efficiently. But sounds like maybe not the case here, huh?
Well, I think if you can operate it under a single standard of performance, then you get that.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said in my comments when we voted to dissolve the merger was that on paper this sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
And I was hopeful that it was a precursor to merging other departments between the city and the county's unincorporated, the special service district areas, whether it was permits and inspections and parks and recreation, and I mean a number of things that I think we could get greater efficiencies if they were just one department.
Right.
Certainly, even if you have the same amount of staff people because of what you have to do, you could find some efficiencies in administration.
Right.
So you wouldn't need duplicate management. And I had been hopeful that could happen. But you have to be operating with a merged philosophy.
Right.
You can't run two-tiered systems.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the county commissioners believe that they can do this a lot cheaper than what their share of the merged force would be.
That seems to be the indication, again, just really from the media reports and second-hand reports, or maybe perhaps third-hand in some cases. But that seems to be the thing, is that they think that they have a much lower crime rate in general in the unincorporated areas for sure, and so they're saying, hey, we don't need that. We don't feel like we need that many officers. We don't need to spend that much money for crime in our area, so we don't want to go there.
The thing that happened though is there were a lot of complaints that we weren't providing enough service, that most of the service was going into the city areas, and so one of the complaints and one of the things that the Berkshire study was looking at in terms of the funding formula was how much time officers spend in the county, unincorporated county, versus the city.
Right.
And we put GPS locators on every vehicle, so we could actually track where the officers were, how much time they were spending in the county and in the city. I mean, we were making every effort possible to answer the questions and have a data-driven conversation.
Yeah.
They had asked for separate beats so that anyone working a beat that was in the unincorporated area was only working in the unincorporated area, and the city beats would be exclusively city beats. Well, again, that's not a merged department. Then.
Right.
You're operating separate entities.
Yeah.
The thing about running a cheaper department just for the unincorporated area, certainly you can do that. The real question is, if you're running something cheaper, are you getting the public safety needs taken care of that you need?
Which is
that's
number
a
one
big
thing.
question mark, because there's one of the efficiencies in the merged department would be that you were dealing with all of these areas you're dealing with all of these areas as a whole. When you start operating separate departments, a problem that you've got is these pockets, both of the city and the county,
Right.
that are not connected.
Right.
And so you're actually having to go through other jurisdictions to get to
Right.
the service area. That's a
Right.
complication that will be very inefficient, particularly for the county. Some for the city, but especially for the county. So that's
Yeah.
an economic issue.
Right.
And then one of the things that is a national trend and also happening locally is crime is increasing in the unincorporated areas. Because of demographic shifts, who's moving into the unincorporated areas, who's moving into the city. We're seeing this national trend, and like I say, it's being replicated locally. That we're seeing this increase in the unincorporated areas. So if they're going to have the level of police protection that they want, ultimately, they're probably going to be in the same boat the city's in terms of crime rate.
God, well, I hope not, but
Well, I'm not wishing that on
Yeah,
anybody,
no,
but
of
that's,
course not. I
that's
know
the
you're not.
again, that's the data
Yeah.
that we're seeing.
Okay. Well, all right. What about this letter? And of course, there hasn't been much time to do. But I mean, just on your own opinion, at least, or any comment about that? Any reaction to that? What do you think?
Well, I don't think any of us on the city side actively wanted to break the merger.
Sure.
I feel like we were put in a position where we didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I think that there are at least a couple of county commissioners who really did want to break it,
Right.
who have been opposed to it from the beginning, and how much they had to do with what ultimately happened, I don't know. I know that they were certainly one was very vocal about breaking this thing. The letter, in its broadest sense, certainly reflects the way I think most of council felt. We were disappointed to do this. We didn't do this happily.
Right.
And if there were a way to make this work, I don't think any of us would be opposed to trying to find a way to move forward. And I don't want to speak for anybody else,
Right.
but we all liked the idea to start with. That the idea and liking the idea hasn't changed. It was when the thing had to be put into practice, the realities of making it work were the complication. And
Yeah.
so if these business organizations can find a way to get the county to the table, the mayor has already said, okay. And I think it was reported in there, and I was in the mayor's office yesterday with him for a few minutes and saw the letter. I think it was yesterday. And Eddie will sit down and talk to anybody.
Right.
It's not a question, and he's already agreed to do so. But according to the story, they still haven't heard from the county, so it
Right.
seems to be more of the same to me.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no. Do you think this opens the door a bit? Because I don't know. The last I heard, and I'm trying to remember where I saw that honestly, but I think he said something. He was not necessarily, didn't seem that open to the idea. Now that's my faulty memory trying to remember it, and I'm trying to find it in the story here to see if I'm remembering it from there. But at any rate, I remember something to the effect of, I think the train's already left the station or something like that. And forgive me if I'm wrong. As I say, I'm working off of memory, but
Well, there was something to that effect in there
Yeah.
from the mayor, I believe. But the point was, we've done what we needed to do.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that in the next 6 months, because this is a 6-month time frame. This becomes effective February 1st in 2018.
2018, right?
So, there's time
there's
to change our
time,
minds
right.
if we wanted to do that. The thing is, I personally, I'm going to need some real convincing
at this point,
because it would be easy for us to come back and say, okay, well, all is forgiven and we'll make this work.
Right.
But if we're going to keep having the same problems of not being able to get the policy committee meetings together, if we're going to have the same 2 or 3 members of the county commission constantly carping about anything we want to try to do, then I just don't see any reason to keep going through that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, So, as you say, there is time, and time will tell. But yeah, I guess this does sort of add to the element for the city council, a sense that, well, I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. These are the problems, and now you wonder even more whether or not this would be effective and the best way to go in the first place. So, I guess, and I'm just conjecture here. Obviously, I don't know, but.
I wish it weren't so.
Yeah.
But there are times when you just have to acknowledge realities.
Yeah.
And this seems to be one to me. The thing, one of the things that we keep being told is that with this breaking of the merger, the about 95,000 unincorporated residents are fudging our statistical numbers in terms of crime report, and that as soon as we demerge the police department, our crime statistics will go sky high. I mean, they're too high already. But the notion is that, I mean, this is what's being said by at least at least one of the county commissioners, that when we no longer have those 95,000 residents where the crime rate is very low as part of our statistical base, then our numbers go higher.
Wow! Yeah.
And I think that's possible. I think initially we'll probably see a bump.
Ooh.
That won't stay that way, because we have been seeing for the last 6 or 8 months trending downward with the various things that we've been doing with boosting the police force and intelligence-led policing and the in-gun violence program. I mean, a number of the initiatives the police are working on are not solving anything overnight, but they are moving us in the right direction.
Yeah.
There will be hiccups to that along the way, but I think that whatever happens in any kind of initial jump, just based on statistics, it doesn't mean that anything more is happening. It's just a statistical reference.
Yeah.
But I think that will resolve itself very quickly.
Okay. Well, wow. Okay. Well, we'll just have to see how that develops, I suppose, as far as the merge goes, and whether it's better or worse or works more efficiently or less efficiently. Let's just think a minute. And again, sometimes I just kind of play devil's advocate with various things on these shows. But one thing I have to say that struck me, and I know other people I've kind of talked with about it, and is the idea that it's going to take like 3 years, to get to that number. If we were looking at 150 or whatever it was, is it 3 years?
Well, they suggested either a 3 or a 5 year time frame.
And
if we talk about this just based on the Berkshire recommendations now, which are with the demerging, the numbers change.
Sure,
the time frame doesn't change. We will still target a 7-minute response time in 3 years.
Yeah.
And in some ways, we'll be able to do that without having to stand around and argue about it.
Yeah.
But it won't necessarily be the 150 officers.
Right, exactly.
The complication, and the chief has said this to us on several occasions, he said, you can give me all the money in the world, but I can't spend it that fast. So you can tell me to hire 100 extra officers tomorrow. I can't, because it takes time to get those officers hired. We are doing constant recruiting for police officers. And, we raise salaries, the starting salaries for police officers to make the job more attractive.
Yeah.
And, of course, then all the communities around that compete with us for those same people raise their rates as well. But the thing we do is we advertise and we go to job fairs and we do a number of things to solicit applications. We have fixed some of our application process that was a little clunky, so that works a little bit better. But there are times when we might get 15 or 20 applications a month, something like that. I think 20.
Yeah.
At one point, we were getting quite a few because of a real push. But I believe our normal application rate is probably in the 15 to 20, 25. It may not even be that some months. Well, most of those applicants are not going to be acceptable candidates.
Right.
So if you can pull 10 applicants out in a month, which would be optimistic, I think, it would take you 10 months to get to that 100.
Yeah,
You're gonna
I
need.
guess.
And then when you hire those guys, it is 9 to 10 months before they're on the street.
Yeah.
Because of the training they have to go through. So I mean, they're on the payroll day one.
Right. Sure.
And it costs us, I believe the last time I saw the number, it was $70,000 to get a police officer on the street. For the 9 months of training we put them through,
right.
Uniforms, equipment, payroll.
And Lord knows we don't want to skimp on the training.
Right. No. And the chief is terrific about that, and has enacted a lot of additional training besides just the basics of, and not just for new officers, but for the multiple levels of staffing.
Mm-hmm.
He has been here, I believe it's about 3 years now, and he is just now getting some of the management of the police department where he would like for it to be. None of these things happen fast, and a big part of that is just how quickly you can recruit, how quickly you can replace people that you feel like you need to replace. We try to run now. When we took office, what was supposed to be a 605-person department was 100 officers down, and had been for some time. Had been understaffed for 16 years.
Right.
And it's taken us about a year to get fully staffed, and we gave the chief discretion to overhire.
Right.
So he always has officers in the pipeline, because we will have a several officer per month attrition rate.
Yeah.
Either retirement or quitting to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So getting the 3-year period to get that 100 or 150 officers or whatever it amounts to is it's probably as realistic as you can recruit that many people and get them on the street.
Okay. That does sound, when I first heard it, I really thought, wait a minute, why in the world does it take that long? But you can see this is a time-consuming process, and you've got to get the right people for sure. I mean, that's a key thing. This is not, this is a kind of a position that you can't just go out and just grab somebody and put them on. All right, we're going to have to break away. We barely got going, Bill. We're already, like over halfway. But listeners, hang on for just a minute. We're going to take just a brief break. I do want you to know you are listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. Hang on just a minute.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com.
All right. Folks, I want you to know that as a business, if you enjoy our programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving community based on diverse, vibrant radio programming. As a business partner, our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/business. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/business. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP. All right. If you're just tuning in, my guest today for Savannah Lexicon is Alderman of the 2nd District, Bill Durrence, and we have been talking about the on-again, off-again, currently off-again merger situation between the Savannah Police Department, City of Savannah, and Chatham County. We've discussed a good bit about that, and I guess we just need to also, Alderman, just talk about the unfortunate crime. You mentioned some statistics in going down, but boy, this recent situation in City Market certainly got everybody's attention, and certainly a sad scenario there. It just is so disheartening, but the police department on that evening, for instance, responded extremely quickly. So, you can't, what can you do?
I wish I had a good answer to that. Some of the calls I got made me think that some of these folks feel like we've got a magic wand we can wave and just solve the problem, and somehow we're waiting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that thinking.
And wait a minute, I'm sorry. You talk about some people think you have a magic wand, and
right, that we can somehow wave and solve these problems,
okay.
and that we have just been reluctant to use that. We have been doing the grunt work. Well, I say we, I mean the police department in particular,
Mm-hmm.
and Chief Lumpkin, been doing the grunt work that eventually leads to these gradual decline in some of the Part 1 crime statistics.
Right.
Things like the in-gun violence program, where
Right.
the huge majority of the Part 1 crime is done by a very small group of people that are mostly involved in groups and gangs. And the in-gun violence program will call these groups in. This is part of the intelligence-based policing that we're doing more and more of as well.
Mm-hmm.
We can identify these people. We can know when something happens where we might expect and who we might expect retaliation from.
Right.
And so we can do things to try to head off some of that stuff. In calling these groups in and speaking to them, the police can make it very clear to them that if they don't change their ways, they and their friends and their families are going to be targeted for any kind of efforts the police can make toward preventing or bringing them to justice on their activities. And we have had some luck. They're given an opportunity during these call-in sessions to say they'd like to change their life and the way things are going in their life. And if they're willing to do that, we do what we can to help them do that. And we've had some of these gang members opt for that to get out of the behavior patterns. It's a step at a time. I wish there was some easy solution to this, but the thing that the chief points out regularly that I think it doesn't make this less tragic when someone dies.
Well, no,
but it's important to keep in mind that the huge majority of this violent crime is between people who know each other.
Right.
It's almost no drive-by kind of innocent bystander stuff. Now, obviously, what happened in City Market on July the 5th is an exception to that.
Right.
But most of the time, it's domestic disputes or disputes between gang members or between gangs. So that doesn't make it any less criminal and any less deadly or dangerous. Mm-hmm. But I think the fear factor should be mitigated a little bit by some of that.
Yeah.
And I've got an opinion that I haven't expressed publicly before now about the July 5th stuff. And it might not be very popular, but I think, and not dismissing anything about the tragic consequences or the how badly everybody felt about it.
Of course.
But the mayor even brought this up in the meeting, the public meeting that he and some others had, the Downtown Business Association conducted about crime in the city and looking
Right.
for new ideas. He said,
Right.
you know, everybody is up in arms about what happened in City Market, but we've had 23 other people killed this year. And
Yeah.
we need to keep in mind that this is a bigger problem than, you know, a couple of popular people.
I know.
And that doesn't diminish, but
Yeah.
there's this tendency. It happened with John Reed, the fellow that had the Australian art gallery
Right.
here.
Yeah,
You see this
exactly.
huge public outcry
I know, exactly.
when certain members of the community are impacted, and that's concerning a little bit when this is a problem that affects the whole community.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when people have talked about this, they haven't talked about the people that were shot at. They've talked about the people that died, and the people that died in a traffic accident.
Right.
That doesn't make it any less of a homicide. It was a vehicular homicide, whatever the technical or whatever the charges will ultimately be in that. But one of the things that I've been concerned about on Bay Street for some time is pedestrian safety.
Right.
And to me, this was an issue of that. This was a car that was out of control. Yes, it was the car that a few minutes earlier had done the drive-by shooting.
Yeah.
But this was someone who lost control of their car and ran into pedestrians on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue that some of us have been trying to talk about for a long time is traffic calming and pedestrian safety in the city. And we've got a number of streets where we've got real issues of pedestrian safety.
Yeah.
And I would like for some of this conversation to have focused on that a little bit.
Well, first off, let me applaud you for bringing up what I personally have noticed, and I hear in whispers, because a lot of people don't want to say it because they think it sounds bad, but it's true that, you know, when someone is there's a major crime downtown, everybody is up in arms and making a hullabaloo about it, and that's fine, it should be, but in the meantime, all sorts of crime is going in other parts of the city, and there's very little, you know, hue and cry really about any particular one that happens out there. So,
Well, and I got a lot of grief from some folks, and the morning after, the day after that incident, I got a call from a reporter at the newspaper, and she talked to a number of people, but she asked me what I felt, and basically, what are you going to do about it? And my frustration of feeling impotent in all of this, especially considering we had a substantial amount of extra staff at City Market that night because of the holiday, and the shooting happened with a police car sitting right there.
yeah.
So, and my frustration, I said, I just don't know what you do about stupid, violent people. And that hasn't gotten an entirely, you know, popular response.
Well,
but I don't know what you do
well,
about.
I mean, you know, at some
that.
yeah. I mean, at some point you got to point the finger and say, look, these are, just as you say, stupid, violent people, and what, you know, and then we get into the whole background of poverty and all of that sort of stuff, and you know, I mean, that's true, but you know, you've got to, you can't. You know, you got to try and address that stuff as you can along. But I mean,
we need to address poverty issues, and we need to address undereducated workers, and we need to address a lot of issues to make the community better. But I also reject the notion that poverty is an excuse for violence.
Yeah, well,
there are a lot of people who are poor that don't resort to violence.
Well, you're right. Absolutely,
and
another good point.
Another, you know, quick culprit for this thing is often single-parent families.
Right.
And there are a lot of single-parent families who are single parents for a lot of reasons out of their control.
Yeah.
And it's not always just poor behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, a spouse can be killed, or, you know, in a traffic accident, or die from disease. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people wind up in single-parent families.
Yeah.
And I've known some that have done really well. Many years ago, I dated a woman who was one of 12 siblings.
Wow.
Raised, I mean, the father of the family was killed in a traffic accident when the youngest child was just a few months old. And all of those kids, all 12, I mean, a couple of them were troubled through their teenage years, but they came through it, and all 12 of them came out the other end doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's automatically because it's a single-parent family. I don't think it's automatically because of poverty.
Yeah.
One of the things I read some years ago that has always stuck with me, I was talking about India during World War II
Yeah.
in the Bengal region. And the British, Churchill in particular, was stockpiling a lot of food supplies around the area for after the war for England.
Right.
And there was famine in that area, and people were starving to death, but the Bengalis, starving to death, never raided those supply houses. So I think that there's more to it than just poverty.
Oh, sure there is. Yeah, absolutely there is. And you're right. It is frustrating. All right. Well, I could go on with that for quite some time myself, but let's just think about this a minute. What about the idea that was put out at the time of blocking off certain streets downtown at certain times? Do you think that's a good idea, a bad idea? What do you
Well, there were a lot of things that were proposed that may be useful ideas for the way we manage certain activities within the city, and I think we need to look at each of those and consider them. But none of those would have addressed the issue that happened that night.
Well, maybe not, but
you know, the idea of blocking off a street, I think that there may be on occasion for high activity times,
Right.
festival times, something
Right.
like that, and we
Right.
do that with things like St. Patrick's Day
Sure.
already.
Sure.
So it may be that in the city market area, Jefferson Street should be closed off. To me, that would have more to do with pedestrian safety, again, than trying to prevent somebody from doing drive-by shooting. There would be nothing to keep them from driving down Congress Street and doing the same thing. So I don't think that closing off a street solves the violence issue. I think
Yeah.
it does provide us a measure of pedestrian safety in a time when we've got a lot of people stumbling in the streets.
Right.
There was a suggestion of a bar beat where we actually have police officers who routinely check in at the bars. And there was a notion that somehow, and I don't know where this was coming from, it may be valid, it's just not something I'd heard before, that somehow bars are reluctant to report bad behavior because it winds up being a strike against them.
Yeah, I read some about that too.
Yeah, so if that is in fact true, we need to address that because
Yeah.
we want people to report
Absolutely.
problems without penalizing them for it.
Absolutely.
And maybe there does need to be an officer or two that are kind of checking in routinely with the bars. Maybe there's a benefit to all of this, but again, none of that addresses what happened that night.
Yeah. But they do sound like some interesting ideas to think about. I mean, at bars, cops checking in at bars, that's not a bad
It's
idea.
reasonable.
Hopefully the bars would, would be agreeable to that. You wonder.
You know, if you're running a legitimate business, why wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, unless you're some kind of place that's got something to worry about, then I don't see why you would disagree with that either. Okay, all right. Well, we're getting low on time, but we got a little bit of time, and Lord knows we could talk about all of this stuff we've already been talking about for another, hour and a half or 2 or 3 days for that matter. But what else is on your mind that's going on in the city and the district? There's all sorts of stuff, but what other? These are the most important things, really, in a sense, when you're talking about police protection and you're talking about violence. Those are crucial issues, and you've talked about traffic safety and pedestrian safety as you've touched on here. What else is just sort of on your mind these days?
Well, there's a lot of specifics and a lot of different kinds of things that I'm working through with various groups. What I'd like to call attention to first, though, is a broader conceptual thing that's going on, and that's the new city manager. Well, he's not exactly new anymore, but city manager put together strategic planning with a company, and we spent 2 days with council, 2 full days, working through all of this and identified 5 areas. And the thing about this strategic planning that I think was so good was we identified 5 areas as our target areas, and then within each of those 5 areas we identified 4 or 5 specific measurable targets of things that we can do. And the 5 points for our strategic planning were public safety, I had to write those down so that I get them right each time. But public safety, good government, infrastructure improvements, neighborhood revitalization, and economic strength and poverty reduction.
Right.
And the thing about having these points is it gives the city manager a tool to do two things better. One of the things that seems to have been some of the city's history is people come up with an idea that sounds like a great idea. Okay, here's a program that's a really nice initiative, and it's only going to cost $20,000. Let's fund this. And then somebody comes up with another thing, and well, let's fund this because it's a nice idea. But we can't afford to fund everything.
True.
And so what we need is a focus. And what these 5 priorities give us is a focus for where to manage our budget. So by having these 5 priorities, we've given the city manager a hook to hang every budget expense on. So he can look at everything that is requested and say, okay, this serves that need. This might be a great and worthwhile program, but it doesn't satisfy one of the needs that we've identified as our priority goals.
Okay, right.
So creating these strategic priorities is giving the city manager some real tools to use as he spends the rest of this year putting together next year's budget. That's going to make our budget process a lot better, I think. The other thing that's giving him is a little bit of a roadmap for restructuring the city staff. And he is in the process now, and at the end of the year, we'll be working through this more. And it should take effect at the beginning of next year, at the same time as the new budget goes into effect, is a restructuring or reorganizing of city staffing. The way the departments are organized and who's doing what.
Okay.
And I don't have any details on any of that. But these strategic priorities give him a tool to use in figuring out the best way to create that organization.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the most important broad things that's going on.
Okay.
Specifically for me, there's a number of things, and one of them, of course, is the Waters Avenue corridor. Really anxious to get some kind of reinvestment and redevelopment starting to happen over there.
Right.
As part of some of the restructuring in the city, we are going to be taking the Waters Avenue Shopping Center that has a number of vacant spaces, and we're going to be putting some city staffing in there so that will start. Not only will it make it easier for some people doing business with the city to go where there's a big parking lot and not trying to come downtown and parking issues and access and that sort of thing.
Sounds like
but
good
it
sense.
it'll create some activity on Waters Avenue that should help.
Yep.
The old Romana Riley School, Bill Gross, that's been working for several years trying to redevelop that into some sort of senior facility. He has, I spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he has gotten the tax credits he's been applying for several years, and he's ready to start moving. It's going to be a huge construction project, and they're getting ready to do that, and that could be a real anchor for beginning some activity on Waters Avenue. So I'm hopeful that we're at the beginning of some things starting to happen there.
Okay.
I've hoped for that for a long time, so no promises, but that's a biggie for me. Because that will really drive a lot of East Side stuff.
Yeah.
There's a private group of people who are looking to do some development in the area that will help head off gentrification. There's a lot of wonderful homes in the East Side, and I think a lot of folks that live over there are worried that as we see this constant growth in the community, a lot of those homes are going to start fetching some high prices and start changing that community.
That's what happens.
Well, this group of local businessmen they work with the Savannah Classical Academy, and they're looking at some other development ideas in the area that will help try to minimize the gentrification and really keep that neighborhood as much as possible the way it is, but at the same time improving housing, that sort of thing. Downtown issues are always a big issue because the downtown area is so important to the whole community as an economic driver. The vacation rental stuff that's been going on recently and trying to get a handle on that, I think we have to be very careful. I'm concerned that we're getting a lot of property being bought up based on a cash flow business with vacation rentals, and at some point when we have an economic downturn, we're going to wind up having a crash with some of that. And I'm concerned that the more transient populations we have within residential neighborhoods, the more we're kind of hollowing out the feel of a city that's based on it being a really living city with neighborhoods. We've got a proposal. I'm hopeful that it will work. We'll have to wait and see. One of the things that has been a big issue downtown for a lot of residents downtown for a long time is the proliferation of hotels.
Right.
But the complication we've got is in our zoning laws right now. We actually incentivize hotel development and disincentivize residential development.
Right, exactly.
So I'm working with some local developer and developer attorney folks that are heavily involved in this kind of work to change our codes so that we can incentivize high-density residential development, so we can start creating workforce housing downtown where young people, 20-somethings and 30-somethings, can afford to live downtown.
That'd be nice.
And
even some older people who don't have a lot of money.
well, and seniors are the other end of that. Seniors who are looking to downsize but want to be in town, not have to move to one of the retirement communities out on the fringes of town somewhere.
Yeah.
So improving residential housing and finding ways to start limiting hotel development to more appropriate areas and out of residential areas. I work on the CAT board, and so part of all of this for me is also working to create better transit so that we solve the issue of parking and so many cars. I mean, the thing that we've got to do downtown is reduce the number of private vehicles down here.
Yeah.
So, between vacation rentals and hotels and residential housing and transportation, new development stuff, we've got
Plenty of stuff to be concerned with and involved with. And
well, there's a lot going on, too, because Savannah
there
River
really is.
Landing is starting to take off. Across the street, Madison Retail is getting ready to present their plans for that development. Right behind that will be the Bremer property being redeveloped. So we're getting ready to see a huge explosion on the east side of redevelopment. It'll be a couple of years further down the road, but we're going to see all of the work in the Canal District start to happen.
Start happening.
I mean, the city is on the verge of a huge growth spurt.
It really is. It's absolutely amazing. All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I have got to. We're just about ready for business briefing time. Let me quickly say that first off, I appreciate you listening today to Savannah Lexicon. And next week I'm still working on some of the guests, but next week, for next Tuesday, the next show will be Craig Butts, co-founder of Unity in the Community, is going to be my guest next Tuesday. I'm not sure who's going to be here Thursday, but hey, it'll be somebody good. I promise you. Coming up in the next few weeks, Cindy Kelly, Executive Director, Chatham Savannah Authority for the Homeless. I'm going to have District Attorney Meg Heap in, which I'm delighted about, though the issues we'll be talking about aren't going to be so delightful. But Executive Director of Step Up Savannah is coming in, Alderman at Large Brian Foster, so lots of good people coming in. I do appreciate you guys tuning in with me today. I do want you to know that following up is, as always, the syndicated show Business Background at 9 o'clock, and then at 10 will be Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. So more good programming coming on after me. So hang in there and just keep listening. This is, of course, WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I will also remind you that the viewpoints expressed in the preceding program were not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. The alderman has issued his own disclaimer as well for these are his own personal opinions. So, all right, thank you for tuning in, and keep listening. We've got more good stuff coming your way, and here we go.